We'll get to our next guest in just a moment. I just want to remind people we're at 9:23 and it's 45. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And if you're listening, thank you. But if you're struggling with your hearing, you need to give a call to Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. Now, you might be asking, why would you choose, with all the other choices out there, Mount Harrison Audiology? Well, experience. Dr. Christine Pickup is a certified audiologist. She's approaching 20 years of serving the hearing impaired of all ages. And true diagnostic testing is going to help you know what the cause of your hearing loss happens to be and will lead to the best treatment options. Trust your hearing to a certified audiologist. Call Mount Harrison Audiology for your appointment today, 208-312-0957. We're talking about the governor's veto of the grocery tax repeal today. And, of course, this thing had bipartisan support. That is, it was supported by both Democrats and Republicans and in both houses of the state legislature. Michelle Stennett, leader among the Democrats here in the state, might be the most powerful Democrat in the state of Idaho. I think a lot of people would say that she's number one when it comes to her role in the state Senate as the leader there. First of all, welcome to our program.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Am I right? You're the most powerful Democrat in Idaho.
I think there were a lot of people that disagree with you.
Well, we wanted to mention we've got some Republicans, not all, but some Republicans have filed a suit, and they're arguing with that 1978 court case and the governor about that he missed the deadline on this thing when he vetoed it. Now, your caucus obviously backed this bill, as I understand it, but you're not sure that a lawsuit at this point of the game is really the way to go.
Well, I understand. I think they have merit for questioning because there were two court cases, as was mentioned by Representative Zollinger, and they're in conflict. And so one says that the governor has 10 days to veto upon adjournment, and the other one says that there's a 10-day deadline that until the bill reaches the governor's desk, then it starts to count. And so I think that this case, if it is to go to court, would probably decide with a third decision, which would be the one that we would go by. But my question is that doesn't really change the process. Just the governor will simply have less time to consider vetoes in the future. I think what we should be talking about is the system has to place an override. Right now we have to change the system so that an override veto can be questioned after adjournment. Because right now, if a governor vetoes after adjournment, unless he calls a special session, we don't have the ability to question it or vote again at a 2/3 to override it or do anything. And obviously, if a governor vetoes something, he's not likely to call us back to session for that consideration.
You don't have the option of bringing yourselves back by the looks of things.
No, we're not. And that's what I think in the system should change. If we have that much support with the legislature on a bill like for this grocery tax repeal, then we should have the opportunity to override the governor's veto in some fashion. And right now, we don't have that ability.
I had a call during the break from a caller listening to the program, though, and said we get the tax rebate already on groceries. Most of us, I guess, get that in the state of Idaho. And the caller asked, "What's the difference?" But I assume that the repeal would save people much more money than what they're getting back in the tax return.
Yes, it would, and it happens as you make the purchases, rather than you're actually fronting the money until you can get that rebate back at the end of the year when you file your taxes. This is something that you are able to get the savings every time you go into the grocery store. And I think for working Idahoans, I think they would like to be able to go and get their groceries and have that consideration for each paycheck every week rather than waiting till the end of the year.
A lot of people out there, I don't think they're surprised that there was this bipartisan support for this effort, but it does strike them, I guess, that it came about so quickly because it seemed to have a groundswell and then it just exploded where we had all of these people backing it. That seemed unusual to me. To you as well?
Well, I'm in the Senate. I think the House is a little scrappier, so I'll speak from the Senate. We work well together. We do much bipartisan work in the Senate. We work well with our colleagues. My colleagues in the Democrat caucus work very well with my Republican colleagues. And so for me, it doesn't seem odd. We do a lot of work together. And I think what gets picked up by the press is the few things that divide us that we feel strongly about. But if you look at our voting record, probably over 80% of what we pass on a yearly basis is done in a bipartisan fashion. And there's going to be that 20% that divides us. And it should. We come from different demographics, different backgrounds, different religions, fill in the blank. And that discussion should be had. But in the case of the grocery tax bill, the Senate Democrats worked with the Republican colleagues very closely on this. When the original House Bill 67 came to us, it would have given a tax cut of about $750 a year to those who are the most affluent, and wouldn't have benefited those working Idahoans because they would have gotten about $32 a year. And so when we saw that on our, when that came over to us, we put it on the amending order, and the Democrat on our side, Senator Grant Burgoyne, and Republican Senator Cliff Bear took the lead on it. And we decided that we were going to put in this tax in place of what was given to us because it provides an economic boost. It helps all Idahoans evenly. It's a more fair tax break, and therefore we chose, on the Senate side, to take the lead on making this. And so by the time it went to the House, they had a completely different bill to consider, and I think that's where you saw that groundswell of, oh my goodness, we've got something in front of us different that we can support, and then the House had to pass it as well, and that's where you saw that groundswell on this particular issue.
We have to take a short break, but Senator Stennett is going to join us on the other side of the break at 9:30. Of course, we're talking about the repeal of the attempt to repeal the grocery tax vetoed by Governor Butch Otter. We've got more on that coming up in just a couple of minutes. Pour yourself another cup of coffee or another glass of water. One more half hour is left of Top Story with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I'm going to spend a few more minutes talking to State Senator Michelle Stennett, and our subject so far this hour has been the governor's veto of the grocery tax repeal bill. And where do we go from here? Because it had a lot of support among both parties and among both houses of the legislature. We're at 45. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I did mention earlier, warmer this weekend, but next week, middle of the week, just looks, well, terrible. That may mean you're still using your furnace, and if you're having efficiency issues, you need to call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric. They're located in Burley. They'll come out and they'll get the job done right. They'll get it done right the first time. You can contact them either by going into the office at 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley or the telephone number, 678-0459, Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. Senator Stennett, a question I think that comes up from a lot of people. I heard people say that they were not necessarily in support of the repeal because there was the question about where you find that revenue. Government still has to have some operating revenue, and I think unless you're an anarchist, all Republicans and all Democrats understand that. So the governor's point was simply, I think he may not have been as clear about this, but that he was concerned about a loss of $100 million. So you were kind of giving us an idea just previously about how we could make up for that.
Well, it's a fair point, and that's why both parties in both houses were divided on this. But overwhelmingly, we did decide that it was the right thing to do, understanding that it would take revenue against the general fund, which many people say would take revenue out of the things that we're responsible for, education, corrections, health, and welfare. What we saw was we just had the Amazon sales tax revenues decision, and it's all over the map what that revenue will look like, so I won't even try to quote what kind of income the state will receive from that. But also, we've been trying to fight in the legislature an internet sales tax, and just to make it more to be able to, they're competing with local businesses, and this is we want to keep retail and those revenues in the state. So when we talk about having talked about the grocery tax repeal, we should be talking about those other things that we're not doing that will bring revenue into the state to replace it. In the short term, that Amazon sales tax revenue is a part of that. Down the road, we should be talking about how those other sales taxes can be acquired by the state, and that internet component is one of those big things that we should be talking about.
Yeah, I ordered shoes. I have to do shoe orders over Amazon or through somebody outside the area because of the special size I need. But I did that, and I waited actually until April 1st beyond that so I could help the state out. I just wanted to say I did my part.
Thank you. Well, people forget that they're supposed to put the taxes on what they received on the internet on their income tax forms, but I don't think many of us think about it when we do our taxes.
Yeah, that's just a lot going on in your head. Well,
that's right. That's right.
What really is the next step then? Will this grocery tax repeal be up early next year, and will there be an effort to try to reconcile it with some of the other needs the state has?
I'm not sure. I think we have to depend on, I would hope so. I think that you'll hear from all of the people who have spoken on your program, none of us like to have a huge piece of sausage kind of bill, something that happened in the last couple of days that has a lot of financial impact on the state, be decided in that very short term. All of this should have been a discussion early. It should have had proper vetting with the public, had its hearings in our committees, had recommendations from all sides, and we should have had the opportunity to do an educated vote on it. And so often, as you've probably heard about the transportation bill that we passed in the last day, and this, we should have given it much more thought and vetting and conversation. And so if it does come up again, and I would hope that whatever the outcome is, that we continue to have this conversation, it should be started early, it should have its proper discussion, and I think we should be doing that on all important policy-making decisions that we have during the legislative session.
And obviously there was I heard a briefing from several legislators last week on the Republican side. There is an admission that a lot of the infighting that was going on among the various Republicans may have actually slowed that in the House. Would you second that?
I would agree. I think that while you're trying to get your house in order, you have less focus, attention, and energy on the business at hand. And I know that our House Democrats worked very hard to get bills processed during that period. You have to get the attention of the whole body, and you have to get the attention of your leadership. And so I did think that there was a slow start on that side, and consequently some of the things that we discussed on the Senate side that came from the House were unnecessarily delayed. That said, I think that all leadership should be talking to all of their body and not be doing things behind closed doors, and that leadership from all sides should be sitting down so that we can do policy that's agreeable to all of the people who we represent. I think sometimes people forget that once we're elected, we represent all parties and all people in our district, and it shouldn't be partisan. It should be what is the best for my district. And when I get calls from people in my district, I don't ask them what party they are. I just want to help them, and that's my job. And so we have to remind ourselves that we are in session for that period of time. It is our job to do the business at hand as thoughtfully and thoroughly as possible. And I think sometimes if you get into the politics instead of the good policy making, it can get bogged down, and that's unfortunate.
Well, Senator, I want to thank you for your time, and in the future, don't be a stranger.
Well, I appreciate the invitation, and I won't be a stranger. Thank you so much.
All right, super. Have a great, I guess there won't be a special session. Have a great summer.
Thank you. Well, we'll be working in our districts, but I appreciate this, and I will be calling you.
Well, thank you. Take care. State Senator Michelle Stennett joining us this morning on Top Story. And of course, we had a couple of different voices this morning on the governor's repeal of the grocery, or veto of the repeal of the grocery tax. Got to get that straight in my head. No, I'm not working on a script. 20 minutes away from 10 o'clock. It's 47. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX.